Tonight on PhillyCAM Voices, we have two in-studio interviews and two segments produced by the fellows in the Community Journalism Mentorship Program. The Community Journalism Mentorship Program is a 6-month-long program where participants receive training in media production and build a portfolio of journalistic video pieces produced for television. Our guests this evening are Shira Walinsky from Mural Arts, Dionicio Jimenez, executive chef and owner of Cantina La Martina. And for our segments, reporter Isabella Aponte shares a human interest piece featuring professional skateboarder Jahmir Brown. And reporter Marty Schor continues his series on the hidden gems of Philadelphia's story. Good evening, and thank you for tuning into PhillyCAM Voices. I am your host, Itzel González.
Good evening, Dionicio. As always,
Interview performed by Eric Barragan to Dionicio Jimenez. Chef's culinary journey started at 14 years old, working in a restaurant in his hometown. After coming to the U.S., he learned the ropes of a kitchen, dishwasher, line cook, prep cook, chef, and executive chef. Throughout his journey, Chef has brought his heritage to his Philly home, fusing new flavors and cuisines, keeping his family traditions alive and sharing his Mexican cuisine and culture with the Philly community. Welcome to the studio, Eric and Dionicio.
good evening, Dionicio. Thanks for being here. As always, it's a pleasure to speak with you. Well, moving to a new country like the U.S., it presents a lot of challenges. Can you tell us about your experience on transitioning from different roles in the kitchens, from the most basic to be an executive chef?
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for the invitation. I think the transition is part of our learning program as a chefs, as a cooks. You go in every kitchen, you have a mentors, either co-workers or chefs or from the house. You learn from everyone, and the transition always is a challenge. To be a dishwasher, prep cook, line cook, sous chef, and become a chef, definitely is a journey to learn a lot of. It's a big challenge every single day. It doesn't matter how long it's passed, so you can be a dishwasher one day, you can be anything every day. It's always back and forth.
Yes. How would your Mexican heritage influence your cooking style, and how do you incorporate that into your dishes?
I think it's a learning process you have to do every single day, and every single dish has to be a heart. Every dish needs a heart. If it doesn't have a heart, doesn't have that flavor. And also all those dishes we have at the restaurant is not coming from a family, comes from other families, being from either Oaxaca, Puebla, Chiapas, Michoacan, Chihuahua, everywhere. So it's someone is been teach me all those dishes from the home families.
Excellent. Dionicio, Philly is known for its diverse culinary scene. How do you navigate blending new flavors and cuisines while maintaining your authenticity of your Mexican heritage?
I think it's a challenge every day because one, it's hard to find ingredients in this country. Another one is like you had to learn the palates for every single one. Like us as Mexicans, we always like to use a lot of strong flavors, or spicy, or something can bring all the brightness or the heat of the food. But you have to learn the palate of every single one because not everyone likes to eat the spicy or sour. So you have to play with the ingredients a little bit every time you make a dish.
Can you share a dish that holds a special place in your heart? Perhaps something that reflects your family tradition or your personal culinary journey?
I think one dish can represent or has really part of my heart is the Tres Amores. The Tres Amores is three moles. Mole oaxaqueño, what's a black mole. Mole poblano, that's from my hometown. a mole blanco or where the mole comes from Oaxaca.
Okay, as an executive chef, what challenge do you face in managing and leading a kitchen team? How do you foster creativity and collaboration among your staff?
I think as a challenge, being a chef, especially being Latino, is a lot. It's a lot, and also you have to work with your co-workers as a team because they can teach you a lot from the hometowns and the recipes and the tradition too.
Okay, in the culinary world, trends and preferences evolve. How do you stay updated and innovative in to approach cooking? How do you innovate?
You have to learn, study every single day, follow what's trending, not only here in the States, in Mexico, and find the new recipes, and you have to be learning every single day.
Balancing tradition and innovation can be a little bit complicated. How do you strike a balance in your culinary creations?
Like I said, same team, learning, see what's in the market, see what's trending, see what's coming out, and try to mix something new with something old. That's how you've been trending all the time. So learning is a process every single day.
Just to finish, I know that community engagement seems really important for you. How do you share your Mexican cuisine and culture with the Philadelphia community, and how do you approach to them?
I think it's the same thing, teaching to people what's about our food and what's our traditions, and the tradition and food go hand by hand, and that's what we try to do, show the people in Philadelphia.
Thank you very much, Dionisio. It's, as always, it's a pleasure to speak with you, and go to Cantina La Martina.
Thank you. We went for you at Cantina La Martina.
Thank you so much, Erika and Dionisio, for such an interesting conversation. Up next, we have a segment produced by the reporter Isabella Aponte. Isabella sat down with Philly-born and raised professional skateboarder Jahmir Brown after discovering his passion for skateboarding at a very young age. Jahmir dedicated his entire youth to mastering his skills and navigating a city known as the Mecca of skateboarding. His dedication paid off, as he is now sponsored by one of the largest international skateboarding brands in the scene, Palace Skateboards. Despite the ever-changing landscape of the Philadelphia skateboard culture and earning the success to skate anywhere in the world, Jahmir discusses the significance of a young, successful person like himself to stick around and continue the skateboarding legacy that Philly has always been known for.
Hey, so you began skateboarding at a pretty young age. I read around 6 years old. Do you remember what first inspired you to pick up a skateboard, and when did you realize that you could make the talent and interest into a professional career?
I guess the first eyes I've ever had on a skateboard was because I bought Tony Hawk Pro Skater. I was like 5 or 6 years old, and it was one of those things that just kind of spoke to me as soon as I seen it. And when I took that game home, I played it, and I just knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. It was pretty much that simple. I guess over time and just like a lot of practice, a lot of broken bones, and finally getting recognition in my teenage years, I started to get my first sponsors around 13. Started getting free boards, free drink sponsors, like Mountain Dew at the time, and like really cool stuff as a little kid. And then just kept at it over the years, kept practicing, kept finding other people to skate with and other places to travel to, and it allowed me to have a skateboarding career starting around the age of like 20, 21, and being able to make money and travel and really live the dream that my 5-year-old self wanted.
Yeah, a lot of times when I ask people about how they knew, they just said it just aligned, like it just felt right. It's like hard to describe.
Yeah, you don't really choose skateboarding, you kind of choose you.
So there's some discourse of skateboarding not maintaining the underground culture it's pretty known for. Being from a city like Philly, that's kind of like a mecca of skateboarding, what is your perspective on, being underground? Do you think it's important? What does that, how does that play into skateboarding culture?
I guess skateboarding in this day and age is like so publicly accepted, and it's just so normalized now that like it makes people like me, well, let me put it allows people like me to have a job. So the underground always gonna be the underground no matter what subculture you're a part of, but it's up to the people like you who appreciate the roots of the underground and, you know, the history behind all these subcultures to keep it true. But just because it gets popular doesn't mean it's different. I mean, and I wouldn't say like different is a bad thing either. You know, like skateboarding is always going to be skateboarding, but we're growing in a way to allow more people to do it, more people to make money off of it, and more kids like me to probably stay out of trouble.
Speaking of Philly, Philly can be a really complex city. There's so much to love, but it also can be a rough place to grow up and live. Do you find any parallels to growing up in Philly to skateboarding?
Being someone who comes from the city, you know, as rough as it can be, if not one of the roughest, it molds you to never give up. And if you can put yourself in a mindset to chase something, it almost makes you unstoppable. You know, like life is gonna life and you're gonna have your off days, but it's something about the character that my city builds that allows people like me and hundreds and thousands of other people to thrive and keep going about their daily lives, whether they got $1 million or whether they got $10. You know, like the mindset that people have here and the belief that things will get better and fighting for another day is very strong here. And I think that's why we thrive, because we don't give up.
The Philly skateboarding scene has suffered a lot of loss in terms of places to skate. Some of the most known places being Love Park, which was flattened by the city in 2016, despite efforts to keep skateboarders in mind in the new design. More recently, the Municipal Services Building. What impact does these losses have on Philly's skateboarding community, and why do you think the city is so resistant to working with the skateboard community?
I would say over time, the loss of these significant plazas around the city has definitely molded things in a way where maybe the community hasn't been hyped on, but we always find a way to stay alive and keep thriving because we come from nothing. So you can't really take nothing. We're gonna find a way. So, you know, over the years, that's just how it's been. It's gotten better, the relationship between the city and the skate community over the last couple of months. And hopefully some changes will come. But, you know, we all gotta just stay tuned and keep working. But we'll see what the future holds, and hopefully the city continues to open their eyes and realize what we have to offer.
You could probably skate anywhere you choose, so is staying in Philly an intentional decision for you?
Staying here was something that I did on purpose. It was, you know, I don't even know how to explain it other than the fact that, like, every single person that's ever been successful from Philly has left. And I didn't want to leave. I wanted to, you know, I'm not a Meek Mill or like a little Uzi, but as someone that has a small bit of success in doing what they love, I just want to prove to people that, like, you can do it. And I want them to see that every day, and hopefully it inspires them to go do whatever they gotta go do to be who they truly want to be.
For our next segment, reporter Marty Schor continues his series on Philadelphia history, entitled Philadelphia's Secret Revolution. This time he looks at the history of Congress Hall on the corner of 6th and Chestnut Street.
Welcome back to Philadelphia's Secret Revolution, where we explore some of Philly's important but less well-known historic locations and artifacts. My name is Marty, and for this episode we'll explore Congress Hall, the building behind me where Congress met from 1790 to 1800, while Washington, D.C. was being designed and built. Congress Hall stands at 6th and Chestnut Streets, only about 50 yards from Independence Hall. It was originally intended to be the Philadelphia County Courthouse. Whether remembered from our history classes or perhaps from songs in the musical Hamilton, Americans generally know that the outcome of a compromise that Jefferson and Madison reached with Hamilton was their accepting his financial plan in exchange for moving the capital from New York to the Virginia-Maryland border along the Potomac. That compromise was formalized in the Residence Act of 1790, which established what would become Washington, D.C. But in 1790, what's now Washington was a hilly, undeveloped plot of about 100 square miles comprised of plantations and forests without the buildings or infrastructure to house and conduct the government. And it was expected to take 10 years for this entirely new city to be planned, designed, and constructed. So an interim capital was needed. And to address this, the Residence Act also specified that Philadelphia would serve as that interim capital from 1790 to 1800. During the country's early years, much groundbreaking legislation took place here, and it was also the site of many historic events. But before discussing all that history, let's go inside. We'll enter on the first floor of Congress Hall, where the lower chamber, the House of Representatives, met during that interim period. Its initial meeting included 65 representatives from the 13 original states. The Speaker of the House, who was elected by the members, presided from the chair at the front of the room. The first House Speaker was Frederick Muhlenberg of Pennsylvania. The gallery above the room allowed members of the public to observe the chamber's open proceedings. Moving upstairs to the second story, we can see the Senate chamber where initially 26 senators met. This body was presided over by the President pro tem, who was elected by the Senate's members. The first person to occupy that position was John Langdon of New Hampshire. Also on this floor are committee rooms where lawmakers met to work out details and reconcile differences in legislation. The portraits here of King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were gifts from France and were hung here as an expression of gratitude to France for its support during the Revolution. The laws that were passed here reflected the early work of America's representatives to interpret and enact the legislative details of what the framers empowered them to do in the Constitution. And as a result, much of what was enacted was quite historic and consequential. Meeting here, the 2nd through 6th Congresses enacted laws that defined the electoral process for president and vice president, as well as the line of presidential succession. Various other laws written in these chambers structured the federal courts and established the United States Postal Service, the First Bank of the United States, and the U.S. Mint. They also defined the units of U.S. currency, and most of those units continue to be used today. Also in these rooms, Congress established the basis for apportioning House seats based on the U.S. Census. Some of the legislation enacted here was quite controversial, especially the first of 2 Fugitive Slave Acts, considered to have been among the factors eventually leading to the Civil War. Defending the nation was also a high priority on the congressional agenda. Defense-related legislation enacted in these rooms included funding the construction of naval ships such as the USS Constitution, which is fondly known as Old Ironsides. Other laws passed here created the United States Navy and Marines, provided for states to raise militias, and authorized the president to utilize those militias to protect the country from foreign or domestic threats. In addition to legislative acts, certain other proceedings were also conducted here, and other significant events took place during this period. In 1792, the House conducted the government's first investigative hearings, examining General Arthur St. Clair's defeat in the Battle of Wabash. George Washington's second inaugural was held here, as was John Adams' first inaugural, which importantly signified our first peaceful democratic transfer of power, as well as Washington's precedent of limiting himself to 2 terms. It's also noteworthy that between 1791 and 1793, during the Second Congress, the size of both houses increased when Vermont and Kentucky were admitted as the 14th and 15th states. Also during the period of the Second Congress, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution were ratified and embodied as the Bill of Rights. Well, that concludes our visit to Congress Hall. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you learned something from it. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll join me again for our next installment of Philadelphia's Secret Revolution.
Thank you, Marty, for such an excellent segment. And now, our final guest this evening is Shira Walinsky. Shira Walinsky is an interdisciplinary artist, educator, and immigrant advocate. Her work centers on the stories and resilience of immigrants and refugees in the city of Philadelphia. Welcome to the studio, Shira.
Oh, thank you so much.
How are you?
I'm great. So happy to be here.
Could you let us know a little bit about the work you do, especially around how do you intertwine public spaces and immigrant communities, and vice versa, how you integrate immigrant communities and public spaces into your work?
Sure. I think the story goes back to 2011, and my boss at Mural Arts, Jane Golden, said, do you want to work on a project with new immigrant and refugee communities, especially refugee communities to Philadelphia? And I said, yes. Many new families from Burma and Bhutan had been resettled in South Philadelphia, and I said, yes, and I don't know. So I connected with a social worker and then met families and felt like I was hearing about people who felt like they were dropped into another planet, basically, in South Philadelphia from rural parts of Burma and having lived in refugee camps. And so thought maybe we could open a space. So we opened a space at 7th and Dudley, thanks to Jane Golden and thanks to the social worker, Melissa Fogg, that I worked with, and community leaders. And the space opened up so much possibility for exchange and for creating frameworks for stories. And, the story of arriving here, resettling, the story of pride in your language from home, the story of the dances that you bring, the food, and I really see art as intertwined with, all of life, really. But for me, I got to meet people, and I feel like exchange is so much a part of it, and yeah.
And usually, where does your interest for these populations comes from? Because usually it's more common to see, like, I don't know, if you're Pan-Asian, you're into like Pan-Asian communities, and you're like, well, I'm just gonna be with immigrant communities, everybody can have the potential to be an immigrant, but you just do it. Like, where does that interest and passion comes from?
I think it came from my grandparents, and my grandmother came from Lithuania, grandfather from Ukraine, great-grandparents from Eastern Europe. And so those immigrant stories, I was so fascinated, but really became more fascinated as they got older and I couldn't actually get as much of the story as I wanted. I wish I could go back. So there's always like my grandparents in my heart. And Philadelphia's a story of neighborhoods and immigrants. And as soon as I began to work with new families in South Philadelphia, I felt like, oh, this is where I want to be. And I think that a great thing about the city is the places where people can meet together, where, you learn about other communities, in the city. And that's a role that art can play, I think, is in translating those stories and being a medium. So from murals to films to books, these are all ways that we can share our stories. And I think there's just a great place for that in the city. And I feel once you learn the stories, you feel connected and you feel like part of a larger group other than your own inner group. And to me, that is really special, really exciting. It means you learn so much. And I think the city provides us that opportunity. And really, I think immigrant refugee communities bring so much that the rest of the city can appreciate. It's how do you find a way to see that? And I think story is a way you again can enter that. Yeah.
And something I have seen from your work is that, immigration is a very core part of it. But I also see that you give the opportunities to immigrants and refugees to also do work related with art. And so how you do that, and how is that has improved your life?
Sure. I guess I'll go back even further. I've been doing murals for 20 years in Philadelphia, and the role, what murals do is they hopefully create access, and art around the city. And so the goal is that you are creating ways for people to be part of that process, whether it's coming to a community meeting to talk about the mural, what should be in the mural, or participating. So I've always felt, how can we find ways for people to be involved in this process? And then it's grown and grown. I think by the time we opened the center, Southeast by Southeast, I began to think, well, it can't only be the murals, because we're working with communities that are coming with such rich tradition. So how can we look for artists within those communities and find ways to highlight their work? So the weaving from the Karen group from Burma. This weekend we had an event where we showed Tenango embroidery. So thinking that this really is part of what a space can do, which is to be this place of sharing. And from the very beginning, there have been community leaders involved in this space. There's been one community leader, Nado, from the Karen Burmese community, and she's been, a part of what happens at the space Southeast by Southeast.
Any final words you have to say?
I think that, one amazing thing about Philadelphia, we're a city of over 4,000 murals. We have so much rich culture here, so much diversity, and I think the arts really play a role in allowing us to understand those stories, and they're really vital, and as vital as the communities are.
Thank you so much, Shira, for all of this wonderful interview, and thank you everybody for staying tuned to this show. Thank you for tuning into this episode. Look out for in upcoming months for more stories from the Community Journalism Fellows. You can also watch our show on YouTube and Roku, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.